Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the West Virginia Land Trust Special Places Celebration Week. This year we've gone virtual because we can't be in person. And so we've opted to go with a series of evening interviews with people whose work makes a difference and who also ties into the work of the Land Trust. Hope you enjoy these interviews. I think that we are finding that there are so many great resources all around the state, and these resources all can tap into protected land. And so drawing those connections is important to us. This evening, I'm really happy to have Associate Professor from WVU, Christiaan Abildso, who works in the School of Public Health. And Christiaan, welcome. Really glad you would help frame this issue tonight, which is really about nature prescriptions. And before we launch into some of the Q&A, I thought that probably, even though people sometimes think that folks who work in the environment do not have a sense of humor, well, look at this. Take a look at this video, and that'll kick us off.
Find yourself longing for the apocalypse? I did. I was looking for a reason to live. Hi. Are you feeling tired, irritable, stressed out? Well, you might consider nature.
From the people that brought you Getting Outside comes prescription strength Nature, a non-harmful medication shown to relieve the crippling symptoms of modern life.
Nature's recommended for humans of all ages, and it's great for pets too.
Nature can...
I love it. It kind of sets the stage. Thank you, Christiaan, for bringing that to us.
Sure, it's my pleasure to be here.
So, I mean, I think that, this does echo a theme that we have really heard during this time of COVID, which is people calling us up saying, I'm so glad that there's a place I can go and hike. Thank you for your preserve. Thank you for maintaining it. Can you talk a little bit about, the connection between nature and public health and how you see that playing out?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for Tom's run. I mean, when this thing started, we went out there a few times and brought a little peace and serenity to the whole family. So
yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, in my world and in the public health world, we like to look at interventions and whether they, how they help, but we look first to the evidence to see if there's some kind of inkling, just some kind of potential link between X and Y, and in this case, nature and health. So, whether it works is one of the first questions, and there's a good bit. I mean, there are hundreds of studies that have shown that nature and more access to nature is beneficial for older adults, and reduced mortality, for younger adults also in a bunch of different physical and mental health outcomes, including things like cardiovascular disease, blood pressure, improved HDL, and lowering cortisol, and others, and lower incidence of like type 2 diabetes. There's also a newer line looking at children and adolescents, especially in mental health and emotional and behavioral issues. There are a few studies on that, but nothing perfectly conclusive yet. So it's a young field. It's still trying to find its way, but there's a good bit of research. A lot of it started with the whole forest bathing or Shinrin-yoku movement in Japan, and now is it's spreading around the world.
I know that one of the first times that I really heard about it or got connected to it was through the book by the journalist Richard Louv, L-O-U-V, who wrote about nature deficit disorder, and it was Last Child in the Woods. And he really bemoaned the change in patterns of activity in the United States, especially for children, and how that led to a whole series of psychological and physical impacts because kids were not as active outside. And I'm curious, I mean, when you talk about forest bathing, this pretty much comes to us from Japan. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, that's all right. I just think that I feel like forest bathing has been something that's been kind of recent to arrive here, where we think, oh my gosh, there's a whole culture out there that kind of practices this and knows the value of nature. Mm-hmm. Is that true?
Yeah, and in Japan, basically, they took, and I think in China too, they basically took a whole bunch of stressed out urban city dwellers working, just on the treadmill every day. I mean, on the employment treadmill every day, just super stressed out, and brought them out to a research center a forest bathing research center, basically, to document the changes, physiological changes, just from a weekend in the woods. So first they were trying to answer if in an intervention it had a benefit, what those benefits were. And now I think they're really working on kind of a dose response. Like, you take this much of a pill, you can expect this much of a response, kind of thing.
Okay. So in terms of our own state of knowledge and the practice about nature prescriptions, does that happen here in the United States, or what additional kinds of what additional kind of research would need to be done in order to really make it a prescription that medical practitioners would buy into? Right.
Yeah. I mean, there is some precedent. Obviously, physicians are used to prescribing things, so I think people tapped into that. Our friend and colleague Bill Rieger Nash in the past used walking prescriptions, right, as part of his Wheeling Walks and West Virginia Walks campaigns. And others have done, like National Park Service is working with folks on park prescriptions. So this is a little different because it's not necessarily a prescription to go be active for 30 minutes a day. It's just to go get into the woods. There are others. So what the hard part now is kind of parsing out whether it's, what is the mechanism? Why are people seeing these benefits? Is it something about like the microorganisms you're exposed to? Is it just being out in the sun and vitamin D? Is it the physical activity? So those are some of the questions to understand. And in public health, I teach evaluation. So what we look for is, if you're doing some kind of intervention, you have to have people like interventionists. In this case, it would be a health professional. What is the incentive for them to get involved? How would it work for them? How do they prescribe it? And then on the other side, do people receive that prescription? Do they actually go and take their pill, right? Right. And from your side, from the land trust side, I can't tell anybody to go walk in the woods if they don't have a place to go walk in the woods, right? Right. So preservation and improvements on the preserved lands, and having people there, whatever kind of infrastructure is needed, that's the other side of it. Because you could wag your finger at someone all you want, like we used to preach in the 1970s in public health: go run, go run, go run. But if you don't have that place, in your broader environment, you could do that. You could tell someone till you're blue in the face, and they're not going to be able to do it. So combining the environment and the individual with some kind of call to action or some kind of activation of a public space, that's the winning combination.
Right. And do you think, in terms of a West Virginia context, do you see particular ways that might play out, or either opportunities or barriers in order to make some of that real for folks?
Yeah, I think obviously the barrier is oftentimes in public health we talk about, well, you tell someone to go to the dentist, let's say, but do they have transportation? That's one thing. That's very common in rural places, the struggle with transportation. Other things, so a few of us around the country that work on physical activity in rural places in particular, we've done some interviews, particularly in Texas, and a lot of people there, a few people there actually said there's a cultural barrier and a difference in the perception of the woods. You and I might just go for a hike in the woods and not worry about it. Other folks have been like, people are cooking meth or making moonshine back there, so it's not a safe place. Mm-hmm. That's why some kind of intervention, some kind of invitation, and a feeling that I'm invited into this public space can be important. I'm not sure if that's a barrier in West Virginia. I've heard anecdotally people in like health departments say, we have these beautiful mountain bike trails, walking trails, river trails, but we just can't get locals to use them. They think it's for the tourists. They think it's for others than themselves. So that could be a barrier. I'm more of an academic, so I want to get more and more information and evidence, but that could be at play. So the invitation to go out might be very important. And right. Encouragement from a physician or nurse or community health worker or something like that.
Yeah. And that's a little bit ironic too, because I think that West Virginians generally do have this real tradition of being in the outdoors. We're loaded with a lot more outdoor spaces in general than most other states are, though access may be a problem. But, you deal with folks who have grown up in rural areas, and they often do know the woods. They've been hunting, they've been fishing, they've been digging ginseng or other medicinal plants. I mean, there's a familiarity, although when I did my own dissertation on hunters and gatherers in West Virginia, one of my most memorable interviews was with a guy who said, well, Junior's on the internet. Junior is not out there in the woods anymore. And that's really different than when I grew up, and I can't get my kids interested. So it does sound, and that sort of to me echoed that whole Richard Louv thing that about Last Child in the Woods, which is, you know, it's hard to pull kids away from the screen in many cases, and yet that would be a really good idea.
Absolutely. Those things are seductive and they're addictive. I mean, it's hard. We fought the good fight for about 8 or 9 years before COVID, and our children were barely on screens. But now we've got to get them. I mean, they have to. We kind of have to get them on there for school, and then we have to shut it down and kick them out. So that could be at play too. And I was reading something, even hunting, percentage of people that hunt is way down too over the last few decades. So and you know, in some of these interviews and in other places, I'm not sure if the hunting, fishing culture, you know, what the activity level is either, whether it's associated with, you know, a good bit of activity, or, I mean, there's this, what is it called? Buck fever research. Like the rate of heart attacks goes up as soon as deer season opens, because men are, in men specifically of a certain age, because of the lack of fitness and the lack of activity throughout the year. And they're dragging this massive deer right out of the woods. Right. And they're sort of seeing this spike in heart attacks and cardiovascular events. And the Mayo Clinic and others are actually using places where you buy your hunting license to encourage men specifically to get into some kind of physical activity program to get ready to be a good hunter. So that appeals to the culture specifically. So really fascinating.
Yeah. So here you are with kids at home studying remotely, and you're interested in physical activity in the outdoors. What do you think can be done at the local level, either as a parent or more at the community level? What do you think needs to happen?
Wow. That's a loaded question.
You know, there's probably 100 answers, but you know.
So the work on creating more safe places for all ages. So I'm on the statewide Complete Streets Advisory Board, the policy advisory board. So creating more, like if I were to go outside of my house, I should not have to drive somewhere to be active. I think that's a crime. I should be able to go right out my door, be able to go for a 10, 15, 20-minute walk. Everybody should, to get their dose of activity every day. So that's one thing at a community level. Obviously, creating those more, you know, we could look at people on a gradient of ability too. We could look at people who need rail trails, right, and nice flat, smooth surfaces that are not, you know, the super steep leg burners for mountain biking or something. So I think that grade of different levels of expertise and fitness needs to be supported too with the type of infrastructure. But I mean, I wish every business, every CVB, you know, every politician was preaching, go get your 30 minutes a day. Just 30 minutes a day, be active. That's it. And then providing the encouragement for everybody around them. Have standing meetings, have walking meetings, just integrating it into common practice and embedded in policies and plans for how cities and counties grow, into economic development plans. I mean, you know, with this movement potentially that we're seeing now, people coming back out of the urban areas because of COVID, they're seeking space. Maybe if we can get better Wi-Fi, create these spaces that people in urban areas are more used to be active, we could keep those people, right? We can recruit and retain young talent, which is critical for the survival of West Virginia.
Yeah.
So I think these healthy places will do more than just get you and me active. It could keep our young people here and keep them active. And in generations, we'll see it's just part of the culture then.
Mm-hmm. I know that in our work with the Land Trust, when we look at potential properties to be conserved and we're trying to identify places that should be set aside or that we'd like to help protect, we often look at what are the other options in the area. And it is surprising in rural West Virginia how often we come across communities that don't have any place to go, that there may not be any lands that are managed for public use. And I mean, we're a private nonprofit conservation organization. We're not your county commission or your state parks or, you know, a state or federal entity. But there are opportunities at the local level for community-based conservation that can create these places for folks to go. Even if it's just, you know, 75 or 100 acres, you can create a nice network of trails, but getting that proximity to those outdoor places is a challenge in many cases. And whether it's the challenge of acquiring the land or the challenge of understanding how to make it available to the public or finding the funding in order to make that happen, I think that there are a lot of barriers that we run into that we try to circumvent. It does seem to me that at WVU, there are other entities also right now that are looking to promote outdoor recreation for a variety of other reasons, some for economic development, some for public health. I know you're connected with the Center for Active West Virginia. And can you mention that? Just talk a little bit about that for a second.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fairly new center that is working on, you know, both kind of the policy side, the environment side, training people. So changing kind of the systems, you know, workforce, changing like school teachers and their ability and their knowledge of how to integrate physical activity into the day, and working with the Bureau for Public Health and others on programming and workplace wellness, kind of evaluating work sites for how they encourage physical activity too. And it's a fairly new center. It's under a year old. My good friend and former dissertation advisor, my dissertation advisor here, Sam Zizzi, is part of the leadership on that. So, I mean, we're actually having an executive board meeting next week. So there'll be a lot more about this from, you know, the leadership of that. But what is it? ActiveWV.org for more information on it. So I'm hoping that center, it's in the College of Physical Activity and Sports Sciences here at WVU. I really hope that can make waves and really integrate physical activity into pretty much, you know, the way everybody operates and a lot of policies and things that will last for generations.
Yeah. Last night we did an interview with Danny Twilley from the Outdoor Economic Development Collaborative at WVU also. And they're sort of coming at it from a development point of view and an economic development, of course, but I think there's a lot of synergy there. And I think it's really wonderful to see that WVU from multiple angles is coming toward this piece of conservation and recreation in order to benefit the public and generate revenue and revitalize some of our communities. Coming from a nonprofit perspective, and as someone who leads a nonprofit organization and depends on a board of directors to provide guidance and leadership, I know that you also are on the board of what I think is one of the just greatest nonprofit conservation organizations in West Virginia, which is the Mon River Trails Conservancy. And in Morgantown, it's a community that's so fortunate to have this spectacular network of rail trails that has been created. So thank you, first of all, for being willing to be on the board of an organization, because that's a heavy load. That's not something where you just go to a meeting and make a vote. You have to really support its mission. So that's a great thing that you're doing too, in terms of your service and your commitment to, it goes sort of beyond your profession, I think. I'd love for you to brag on MRTC for a few minutes too, because it's done great work and you're part of it.
Well, I've been on the board, I think, a year and a half, 2 years. So Ella Belling, our executive director, as you know, being the executive director is tough, and it's you eat, breathe, and sleep it. But she, I mean, you know, I don't know how she does what she does, but she keeps the money coming in from the Division of Highways, keeps improving and working with community members who, I think in the very beginning, it was a lot of not in my backyard attitude. It was very much, you know, we don't want those trails. And now, I mean, I moved here in 2004, I couldn't imagine the place without it. My children were riding their Strider bikes on it and learning how to ride when they were little ones. And it's just an amazing community asset. You know, we looked at some of the benefits, you know, economic and otherwise in some research. And oftentimes it's about, it really is about recruiting and retaining people. And at the county level, obviously, property values go up high, have gone up more near the trail than they have elsewhere in the county. So it's a great source of ongoing revenue for other public goods, other public works. But we are the Mon River Trail. The 50 miles of the system are now the latest inductee in the National Hall of Fame for rail trails. So
great.
But I think even more broadly, if we think of the assets, think of maybe what has been downtrodden. And you've embraced this attitude too. It's some of these environmental assets that have been destroyed and left behind by old industries are now being embraced as an amazing asset. River, rail, old coal mines. These could be amazing new places that spur, just the economic boom in West Virginia, a new one, right? Mm-hmm. So capitalizing, cleaning the rivers, turning them into river trails, turning old abandoned rail lines into probably the very few flat places for physical activity in West Virginia. It's taking what is looked down upon and by some, or it's something that's downtrodden, and turning it into an amazing asset. I think it's a great. That's why I love serving on the rail trail, the MRTC board. I think it's turning something that people have neglected into a great asset.
Yeah. Well, I know from our point of view at the Land Trust, we look forward every year to hosting the Blue Jean Ball, yeah. In which we partner with the Mon River Trails Conservancy, and we share the proceeds after it's a fundraiser. But, good on you too, because great things come of it, and just a little bit of extra money that can be used to support staffing and build partnerships or be a match with a grant. That's really critical funding that comes from individuals and communities. I think that, it's remarkable to me how much revenue a single person staff, Ella Belling acts like a 10-person staff as far as I'm concerned, but the amount of money she has brought to Morgantown in order to generate this rail trail network is phenomenal. But it wouldn't happen if there wasn't funding at the core to support her position to go out and seek those funds and get those grants to happen and contract for the work to be done. So we're all really grateful that MRTC exists. It's a wonderful partner for the Land Trust to work with. And you and your board sure have a lot to be proud of and great results to show for it. I hope that, I think that National Hall of Fame award is very well deserved, and I'm hoping other communities around West Virginia will replicate that too and aim to emulate it anyway.
I appreciate that. The Greenbrier River Trail is on there too. So.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah. Two of the 39 that are on there, so that's pretty awesome. No, yeah. I agree completely. It's great to partner up with the Land Trust and others. Yeah.
Well, do you have anything else that you wanted to add in terms of how you think this stuff should play out, or what you think people should aspire to, or how they can get involved or take advantage of this notion of nature prescriptions?
Yeah, I don't know that it's been tried here in West Virginia. That's one of the things we like to do with interventions. In public health, we like to create some kind of intervention, test it out, get some evidence, see what's working or not, evaluate it, and then move on, try it again, to fix maybe what isn't working. So, even in the School of Public Health, those of us that teach grad classes and, we have practice-based experiences. We have students that are out doing community work. I use my evaluation class to work with a community partner, nudge, nudge, to try to develop like an evaluation plan. We've worked with great partner nonprofits, usually like Active Southern West Virginia. We worked with them. We worked with MRTC, the National Park Service, RTC program. And so, we like getting our fingers dirty in public health. We like digging our fingers in the earth and really helping people that we know are doing the right thing. And my wife has run a nonprofit. She works in a community foundation now. So I know there is a need for this pro bono kind of evaluation, gather the evidence to help organizations apply for a grant or bring in more money. So I'm offering that to you now for all 10 people that are watching. I'm on the hook. So my class is in the spring. But there are always partners. There are always internship opportunities, community partners that, all the colleges and schools around WVU are looking for. And I know WVU Tech and others in the southern part of the state too are doing the same thing. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask.
All right. Well, Christiaan Abildso, Associate Professor in the School of Public Health at West Virginia University. Really grateful you could join us this evening. Thanks a lot for your input, and let's keep on figuring out how we can promote these things together.
Awesome. I'll see you at a Blue Jean ball again soon. Flipping the flipping the discs at the bottle. I miss it.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Great
Chris.
to see you. Thank you.
All right. You take care. Well, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this. I mean, I think that we can see there are so many ways that you can benefit conservation by setting land aside. And here, it can be good for our health, our mental health, our physical health, our kids' development. There's so much that can be done. But as I mentioned, and when we referenced the Mon River Trails Conservancy here in Monongalia County, it doesn't happen just in a vacuum. It doesn't happen just because of government opportunities. It happens because there are individuals and nonprofit organizations who are available to write grants, seek grants, set contracts, hire people to do the work. A lot of that stuff is not paid for by grants. So your contributions go a long way to leveraging much greater income that can arrive in order to improve a community. We're able to leverage this money many times. And I hope that during this week of our Special Places celebration, you'll get online at wvlandtrust.org/donate and make a contribution. More special places are out there to be protected, supporting all of our communities. Thank you for your support. Have a good evening.